Let's take a few minutes to try and make sure we do have a really positive, altruistic intention for being here. So, reciting the prayers that we just recited are meant to help us have a positive motivation. But what happens sometimes is we recite prayers kind of mechanically without really thinking about the meaning. Our mind is elsewhere, thinking about other things. And that's normal, so don't feel bad if that's the case, but it's still good sometimes to just sit and think, why am I here? What do I really want to do with this life that I have? And what is recommended in Buddhism, and not only Buddhism, but probably all other spiritual traditions, religious traditions, is that we use our lives to benefit others, to try to have as much love, compassion, kindness, generosity, patience, and all these other positive qualities in relation to ourselves and others, to try to cultivate those as much as we can and live our lives with those qualities as much as we can. Of course, it's hard to do it perfectly, but at least to have the wish to do that and to try to do that as much as possible. So just spend a few minutes contemplating that idea in whatever way works for you. Try to generate a really positive, altruistic intention and make that your reason for being here, participating in this session and in this retreat. And then let's just do 10 minutes of meditation, concentration meditation. Trying the best you can to keep your mind focused on your meditation object. And yesterday we were talking about attachment, desire for sensory objects. So just see if you can notice that arising in your mind. For example, you might have the thought popping up of wanting to eat something or drink something, or remembering some interesting movie that you saw or music you listened to. So those are examples of attachment. So just in a light way, in a gentle way, just try to be aware, try to notice if that particular hindrance arises in your mind, and then just let it go and come back to your object of meditation. So this kind of shows that it's really hard to find a place that's totally quiet. You know? You think, oh, it's so noisy in the city. If I come here to Sravasti Abbey, it's so quiet, so peaceful, but not always. So, just to say something about the length of time of meditation, in case nobody else has mentioned this, there's no fixed amount of time, minimum or maximum. So it's more that each person is free to choose how much or how little they meditate. Yeah. So one of my teachers, Lama Yeshe, used to say, Even 5 minutes. Even 5 minutes of meditation. That's good. That's good enough. So you shouldn't think that if you're going to take up a daily practice of meditation, it has to be for a long stretch of time. And then it's very easy to come up with excuses like, oh, I don't have time. I can't do that. But I think everybody can find 5 minutes, right? We find 5 minutes to do a lot of other things that may not be very useful. So why can't we find 5 minutes to do meditation, which is very useful? So even 1 minute, like at work, even to take 1 minute breaks. And you don't have to go anywhere. You can just sit at your desk or wherever and just watch your breath for a little while. That can help you to calm down, get yourself into a better state of mind to be able to deal with whatever problems or issues you're having to deal with. So with regard to this type of meditation, concentration, they actually say it's better not to try to meditate for too long in the beginning. Better to start with short sessions, which could be 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes. Because it's hard to concentrate. It's very, very hard. And it can be quite tiring for the mind and the body. Pain can come up. So it's better to start with short sessions and then take breaks. Like even if you're doing a retreat, a calm abiding retreat. I was just reading His Holiness's advice about this, and he says do 5 minutes, then have a little break, and then another 5 minutes, and then a break, and so on. So you could do that for half an hour or longer if you want. And then hopefully your concentration will improve, and you are able to stay focused on your object a bit longer, then you can extend the amount of time to 10 minutes, and then gradually 15 minutes, and so on. And so that's one advice that's given. And I just wanted to mention that in case some of you are finding it difficult to concentrate. And even the sessions you're doing here may seem too long. You're starting to get really restless. And so it's good to know that even doing just 5 minutes is good enough. Certainly better than nothing. It's a start. And also, just to repeat, that concentration is difficult. And I think it really is advanced. It's an advanced kind of practice. And some people may be able to take to it easily, right from the beginning, and be able to have really good concentration. I think that could be because of imprints from past lives. Maybe you did this kind of meditation before, and you can just kind of go into it very easily in this life. But, that's probably rare. So probably most of us do find it difficult. And one of the reasons for that is because we haven't yet learned to manage our mind. There could be just a lot of disturbing thoughts and emotions running through our mind, and we haven't learned to manage those. And so when we try to concentrate, those are just, going crazy in our mind. So it is very good to learn how to manage our emotions, our disturbing thoughts and disturbing emotions. And in fact, this is what one of the great Indian masters, a Sangha who lived, I don't know, I can't remember, a long time ago. He said that, before getting really serious about trying to develop concentration, calm abiding, it's good to work on your disturbing emotions. Figure out which one is the biggest one, your biggest problem, the one that disturbs you the most, and learn how to manage that. So that's why we're looking at this list of the hindrances. We started that yesterday. And we started looking at the first one, which is sense desire, attachment to sense objects. And this morning I remember this little experience that I had a number of years ago. I was staying in Bodh Gaya, India. This is the place where the Buddha became Buddha, attained enlightenment. So it's really a special place. And I hope you have the chance to go there one day. It's not sort of environmentally beautiful and fantastic. It's really in the poorest part of India, and there's a huge amount of poverty around there. But still, there's this beautiful stupa, and in fact, this object here on the altar on the far right for you is a replica of the stupa that's been built on the site where the Buddha meditated and attained enlightenment. And then they build a sort of very nice park all around there. And Buddhist pilgrims from all over the world go there and sit, meditate, pray, chant, do all kinds of things. So it's very, very beautiful. And there's also lots of temples and Buddhist meditation places, monasteries, and so on in the area. So it's a wonderful place to go. So anyway, I was staying there, and what I would like to go in the afternoon and the evening to this to the stupa, because it was more quiet than during the day. During the day, it was sometimes chaotic, so many people. But at night, it was more quiet. So after being there, I was going home to the place where I stayed, and outside of this park where the stupa is, it's like a bazaar. It's like a market. All the local people have these little stalls trying to sell things to the tourists, the pilgrims. So as I was walking through this market, my eyes happened to fall on something. I don't even remember what it was, but I was really in a good state of mind. I could instantly recognize attachment. This I want it, just like that. Attachment can happen so fast. This whole process of seeing an object that appears attractive, deciding it's going to make me happy, and then wanting it. So it can happen so fast like that. So I was glad that I could be mindful of that. And I was able to say, no, I don't really need that. It's not, not even useful for me. But then it occurred to me that it's somewhat similar to what happens with fish. When fishermen go fishing, they throw a line in the water, and on the end of the line there's a hook, and then they put something on the hook, a bait, right? It could be a little insect or some shiny, colorful object, something that the fish is going to be attracted to. So the poor little fish comes along, sees this attractive object, opens its mouth, and then it's hooked. The hook is stuck in its mouth, and then it's caught. It loses its freedom, can't get free, pulled out of the water. A few minutes it's dead, and then it ends up in a frying pan or an oven for somebody's dinner. So I thought attachment is kind of similar to that. We see some attractive object, and we, just impulsively, without really knowing what we're doing, thinking about what we're doing, we go for it, and then we can get hooked, and we lose our freedom. So this is something to think about. Check to see if it's true or not. I mean, we can see this most easily with addictions. Yeah, I mean, little kids aren't addicted to cigarettes, alcohol, right? But at some point in their life, maybe when they're teenagers or older, they take their first cigarette or they take their first drink. And if they like it, then they take another one and another one and another one. And pretty soon it's an addiction. And even if they feel, oh, this isn't good for me and I want to stop, it's very hard for some people. Some people are able to stop, thankfully, but some people are not. And it can really destroy them, destroy their lives, destroy their families. I mean, this happened to me just in the last week. A nephew of mine was found dead, 32 years old, and it was because of alcohol. He's like, my sister, his mother, said it was like slow suicide. He knew it was bad. Doctors had told him, everybody told him he should stop, but he didn't. He kept drinking, and he finally died. And another friend of the Abbey just the week before, someone who had come here and spent some time volunteering and was a wonderful person. Everybody loved him, but he was also found dead from a drug overdose. So many people, including young people, even teenagers. So even if we don't have that kind of problem, drug addiction or alcohol addiction, I think we all have some kind of addiction, if we're honest with ourselves. It could be coffee, it could be food. Mine is chocolate. It could be movies, entertainment, you know. Huh? Facebook. Yeah, I don't do that one. So, or sports. Okay. So I think everyone has at least one and possibly multiple things that we're really attached to, really addicted to. And it's good to, look at this honestly, try to take a step back and look at that and ask ourselves, is this really where I want to be? Is this really what I want to be doing with my life? Do I feel good about this? Does it really make me happy? Do I really need it in order to be happy? Does it have any harmful effects on me? So if we do that kind of investigation and are honest with ourselves, and we do come to feel, yeah, it's not that good for me, and it is harmful, and I would like to stop, it is possible. It is possible to stop. Lots of people are able to do that. There's lots of 12-step programs for all kinds of addictions. And they do help. One of my brothers successfully recovered from alcoholism thanks to AA, and he's been sober for more than 20 years now. He's so thankful. So it is, there are ways to stop. Therapy, meditation. Yeah. So this is actually one thing. We can replace that kind of addiction or that kind of habit with something that's more wholesome, more fulfilling, more meaningful, more satisfying. Yeah? It isn't harmful for our health, isn't harmful for our life, our relationships, and so on. It's actually good for us, both now and long term, in the future, including future lives. And a big part of this, I think, is just understanding how the mind works. How, like we were talking yesterday, the meaning of this word for meditation is, the Tibetan word for meditation is gom, which literally means to be familiar with, or to familiarize with, or to habituate to. This is how our mind works. Our mind works by familiarization, by habit. And since I came here, the Venerables have been very kind and let me have lots of time to myself, so I've been able to read some books. And this is one book that I'd wanted to read for a while. It's called An Open-Hearted Life. It's written by Russell Coltz, a psychologist, clinical psychologist, and Tibetan children, venerable children. And it's about compassion, how to increase our compassion, be more compassionate, and so on. And some of the chapters are written more by the psychologist, some are more by venerable children. Then one of the chapters written by Russell Coltz, the psychologist, he talks about how, I'll just read some of it. He says, when we engage in a particular type of thinking or behavior, there are two effects. The first is the immediate effect of the thought or the behavior. In the case of thinking compassionately, the effect may be to shift our perspective on a situation, provoke different emotions in us, or inspire us to behave in helpful ways. Okay, so whatever we do, there will be some immediate effect, something that happens right away. So in the case of compassion, trying to think compassionately, it will probably open our heart and make us feel positive and feel like doing something useful. In another, if it's something else, like anger, anger comes up, which is also habitual. So if anger comes up, then it will have a different kind of effect. It may provoke us to say certain words that aren't very nice, aren't very pleasant, or do some kind of behavior like slamming something down or slamming a door or punching somebody, depending on how much control we have. So there's an immediate effect of this thought or behavior. And then he says there's a more long-term effect. He says the second effect gives us the ability to transform our lives in the long term. Every time we think or act in a specific way, we make it more likely that we will think or behave that way in the future. Right? Like with a cigarette, you smoke one cigarette, and that can start a whole chain of smoking cigarettes, and then it becomes easier and easier to do, and finally it's at the point where you don't even think about it anymore. It's almost like you're on automatic, pulling out the pack, putting it in your mouth, lighting up, smoking. Okay, so it just becomes an automatic habit. But the same thing can happen with compassion, with loving kindness, with any of the other kinds of positive behaviors or positive attitudes that we're trying to cultivate here. Each time we do that, each time we try to think compassionately or behave compassionately, it sets up a kind of a habit. It becomes easier to do it again. And then the more you do it, it just becomes easier and easier and easier until finally it's just an automatic thing. You don't even have to think about it anymore. It's just your way of being. So you can ask yourself, well, what kind of habits would I like to have? Anger or addiction, greed, jealousy, or would I like to have habits like being kind and compassionate and helpful and having positive thoughts in our mind? And then he talks about how this works in terms of the brain. Okay, so physiologically, according to neuroscience, he says every thought, sensory experience, action, emotion, and behavior in which we engage is reflected in a corresponding activation of cells or neurons in the brain. Every time we think in a specific way or perform a certain action, a pattern of cells lights up in the brain. When these patterns are activated, changes occur within the cells and in the connections between them, gradually making it easier for that pattern to be activated in the future. When a certain pattern of cells is activated many times, it becomes very easy for it to be activated in the future, so that when something triggers it, it can seem to happen automatically. This process explains why repeatedly familiarizing ourselves with compassion makes it easier for us to be compassionate. It also explains why it can be so hard to break certain habits we'd rather not have. Okay? So even when we do recognize some of these unwholesome habits, addictions or anger or attachment or whatever, it's because of the habitual tendency that we've set up. Yeah, so even if we feel, I don't want to do this anymore. Why am I still doing this? I want to stop. But we find ourselves continuing to do it. So there's a physiological basis to that. And maybe other things as well, other factors. But the good news is that it is possible to stop. It is possible to change. Okay? So there are things we can do. And so if we really do want to change ourselves, then we can put our energy into those methods. But even in the Buddhist teachings, it is said that attachment is particularly difficult to deal with compared with the other disturbing emotions. They say other disturbing emotions like anger, jealousy, and so on can be compared to dirt on top of a cloth. You can just kind of wipe it off, brush it off. Whereas attachment is compared to oil stains, right? You spill olive oil or grease on a cloth, you can't just brush it off. You have to scrub and scrub and scrub many times before you can get it out. So attachment is like that. It really kind of soaks into our mind, and it is hard to get rid of. So I'm saying that not to discourage you, but just to encourage you. If you find it's not going away as quickly as you would like, it's normal. But it's not impossible. And, initially what we can do is at least be aware of what our attachments are, and work on the antidotes to attachment. Like yesterday, we meditated on impermanence. So gradually becoming more aware of, accepting of impermanence, which is just the reality of things. It's not just a philosophical idea that the Buddha talked about, but it's true. It's the fact of life that things are impermanent. Initially, we may have some resistance. We don't really want things to be impermanent. So, we don't like thinking that way, and we may feel sad thinking about impermanence. But in the long term, it frees us from our attachment. And I'll tell another story I heard. Ajahn Chah, who's a great Thai meditation master, the teacher of Ajahn Brahm, who I've also mentioned a few times. He was once with a disciple, and this disciple said, how can I really open up to and accept the impermanence of everything and still enjoy life? Something like that. Yeah. So he thought, if you really accept impermanence, it's going to take all the fun out of life. Right? Oh, you'll be depressed all the time. So Ajahn Chah, he had a glass of water on the table beside him, and he said, you see this glass? I see this glass is already broken, but I can still use it. I can still enjoy it and use it to drink from. But I accept that it's not going to be there forever. So I thought that was really beautiful. It shows that if we really open up to and accept the impermanent nature of things, even though initially it's not going to make us too happy, but if we come to, see, that's how things are and we just have to accept it, then we can still enjoy things. We can still enjoy things. But at the same time, we know they're not going to last forever. They're not going to be there forever. But we can still enjoy them for now. And I think, this is my own thoughts about that, we might even enjoy things even more because we know they're not going to last forever. Especially people. Because sometimes with people, we can just sort of take them for granted. Your parents, your siblings, your children, your spouse, your friends, If we don't consider impermanence, if we kind of have this attitude, they're going to be there forever. So, I don't have to be nice to them and tell them that I love them, I can do that tomorrow, I can do that next year. But that's not sure. And I heard another story that's kind of a good example of that. This woman, her son and her husband were about to leave home to go on a fishing trip. And just before they left, the mother and the son had an argument. They were angry at each other, and they were still angry at each other when the son left. And he never came home because some kind of accident happened. He died. So he never had a chance to come home, and the mother never had a chance to, say, I'm sorry, resolve the problem, hug him, say, I love you, and so on. So, I mean, that must have been horrible. It's bad enough losing a child, but then the last interaction you had with your child was an angry one. You were angry at each other. I mean, that could happen to any of us, right? The last interaction we have with somebody could be an angry one. Is that the way we want to end that relationship? I don't think so, if we really think about that. So if we have this awareness that, life is fragile, people aren't going to be there forever, and we never know when that's going to happen, when they're going to disappear from our life, and how terrible that would be if we didn't sort of clear up any anger, any unresolved problems that we may have had with that person, and then they're gone, and it's no longer possible to do that. I mean, we can still do it in our mind, but not in relation to the other person. So for me, that's really, really powerful to think about, that I really want to make sure, I don't have any hanging, unresolved problems or conflicts with people, that I would feel regret about when either they die first or I die first. So then, I don't know, for me, it really brings home how precious people are and how important it is to really make sure we keep our relationships with them good and positive, and we let them know that we really love them and care for them. So we don't have anything to regret. Yeah. So how did I get talking about that? Yeah, so I was talking about impermanence as an antidote for attachment. So it can help us to let go of attachment, but still maintain the love. This is what we want to do with our relationships. Continue having love and compassion and kindness and value people and treasure people and care for them as much as we can, but without the clinging attachment. The attachment is more about me. I want this person around because they make me feel good. I get a lot of pleasure, a lot of enjoyment from them. And that's why I want them to be there. So I think most of our relationships are a mixture of attachment and love. Sometimes there's more love. We really care about the other person. We want to make them happy. Sometimes it's more about me. I want to be happy. I want to make sure you give me what I want. So that's one thing we can do too, is try to watch our mind and recognize the difference between attachment and love. They're not the same. Attachment is more about me and my needs, and love is more about the other person and their needs, what's good for them. And then try to work on having more of that, more love, and less clinging, selfish attachment. And if we do that, of course it takes time. This is a big job. This is a lifetime job, so I don't think you could do it overnight. But working on this and bringing this about will be more satisfying. Definitely, I can guarantee your relationships with others will be a lot more satisfying. There'll be a lot less problems and conflicts and unhappiness. That's good for everybody. Okay, so maybe that's enough for now. Then the next one, number 2 on the list, it's kind of connected with attachment. This is malice, ill will. And this is wishing to cause harm to someone, feeling aversion, irritation, or criticalness, finding faults in yourself, others, the things around you, and so forth. So this one is more related to anger. Anger, hatred, dislike, aversion. And there's many different degrees of this state of mind. The worst form of this is when we actually want to harm somebody. We get to that point where we want to do some damage. And this can happen in meditation. Maybe it's already happened to you. Some thought comes up in your mind of somebody you don't like or somebody who's harmed you, and within a couple of seconds or a couple of minutes, you're already punching this person or cutting them up or screaming at them, all these obscenities, all these, pouring out your anger. I don't think we do this deliberately. I don't think it's a deliberate conscious thing. It's just an automatic thing because our mind is habituated to this state of mind. If we've gotten angry many, many times before in our life, and not just, according to Buddhism, not just this lifetime, we've brought anger with us from past lives. So it's very habitual in our mind, and it's so easy to fall into it when there are the right causes and conditions. So that's the worst form of this. And then there's other shades that are not as bad as that. And then at the other end, there can just be feelings of irritation, dislike, aversion. Like when this hornet was buzzing around the room. Maybe some of you found that annoying or irritating and wished it would go somewhere else or sit down and quiet down. And actually, this is... there's a connection between attachment and this one, aversion or anger. This is another fault of attachment, because when you have attachment to one type of experience or one type of object or one type of person, then when you don't have access to that person or object or experience, you can get angry. Have you ever noticed that? Or when you have the opposite kind of experience, then you can get angry. I saw this in myself because I'm really attached to silence. I love silence. Yeah, I love silence. So the downside of that is then when there isn't silence, when there's some noise, it's so irritating. I really want that noise to stop. I want my silence back. Okay. So if I didn't have so much attachment to silence, I wouldn't be so bothered by or annoyed by noise. So that's just one example, but I think it's true with anything else that we may be attached to. When we can't have what we're attached to, or we have the opposite to that, then we can easily get annoyed, angry, and fall into this second one. So I think it's pretty clear how this is a disturbance in meditation. If this comes up while we're meditating, we can't concentrate. Not only that, but it's a very negative state of mind. Right? And if we're not careful, we may even find ourselves acting out this state of mind and actually doing something harmful to somebody else or to ourselves or whatever. So there's a lot of methods for working on anger. And in fact, Venerable Children has written a whole book, Working with Anger, or Taming Anger, what's it called? Working with Anger, yeah. And other books as well. There was one by His Holiness called Healing Anger. I haven't seen that one around so much, but that was a wonderful book. And then the one by Thich Nhat Hanh about anger. So there's a lot of books, material on how to work with anger. Here, there's just a few mentioned. One is to contemplate its faults. So just to be really clear that this state of mind is unhealthy, disturbing, painful. That itself can be very powerful. And in fact, I have this clear memory with Tanya. I hope you don't mind if I mention this. Years ago when I was staying with Tanya, you told me a story about somebody you'd been friends with, and then you became non-friends, and you were really angry at this person and not talking to them, not seeing them. They were on the other side of town. And then you realized that the anger you had, I hope I got it right, correct me if I got it. The anger you had towards this other person wasn't really harming them, but it was harming you. It was making you suffer. And when you realized that, you thought, oh, I got to change this. I got to get rid of this. Did I get it right? Because I love that story. It's really beautiful. And this is so helpful if we can realize how we are the number one victim of our own anger. Does that make sense? Yeah. As long as we are hanging on to anger, hatred, any of these variations of that state of mind, it's painful. Does that make sense? Can you see that? It's really painful to have that kind of thought, that kind of energy in your mind. You can't be really happy and peaceful while that's going on in your mind, right? So if you can see that, even if you feel totally justified, this person did something horrible and you deserve to be angry, that may be true, but you are making yourself suffer. Is that really what you want to do? Do you really want to keep yourself suffering, harm yourself with your anger? So if you can recognize that, then that will be hopefully the incentive to then work on it, to work on getting beyond the anger, which is possible. It's definitely possible. We can get beyond anger. There's wonderful stories. There's a beautiful this book called, I think it's called The Wisdom of Forgiveness by Victor Chen and His Holiness the Dalai Lama. It's got some wonderful stories in there of people who've been seriously wounded by others, and yet they were able to forgive and stop being angry. Maybe even not angry in the first place. Like this one, he was just a boy, a 10-year-old boy in Ireland, during one of the riots, demonstrations, he was shot by a rubber bullet by a policeman, and it went into his eye or brain. Anyway, he lost his sight as a result of this. He became blind at the age of 10. But he didn't feel angry. He didn't feel angry at the policeman who did this. And later, he actually reached out to this policeman and contacted him, and they met and they became friends. And so there's lots of stories like that of people who, even though they've been grievously harmed or damaged, they really suffered as a result of what somebody else did. They were able to, not be angry or work on their anger and get beyond the anger. And it's so much nicer than to live out your life full of anger and bitterness and blame, hatred. Yeah. So if you can see that, if you can see the benefits of working through and getting beyond anger, then it is possible. We can do it. But so that's one thing that's really helpful, just to see how painful it is. And also from the point of view of karma, Buddhism says, getting angry and acting out our anger, we're creating bad karma. And that means we're going to have more suffering in the future. We're heading for more suffering, not more happiness. So if you believe in karma, then that's another thought to contemplate. And then short term, it can keep you awake at night, doesn't let you go to sleep, have nice sleep, nice dreams. It can harm your body. I remember seeing a book called Anger Kills, written by a doctor. So there's evidence that anger is harmful for our health. It's bad for our health. It can shorten our life. Okay, so even physically, it's bad for us. Okay, so then if we do want to work on our anger, it's said that meditation on loving kindness is a very good antidote. This is the opposite state of mind. Love as opposed to anger. It's not easy, but it is possible. We can work. We do already have loving kindness. It's a natural experience that we feel, at least sometimes for some people. But we have meditations for working on loving kindness, increasing loving kindness, making our mind more familiar with, more habituated to loving kindness. And if you're not comfortable with the word love, some people feel, it's a bit touchy-feely, but you could use some other word. Friendliness, kindness, caring. Okay, use another word for it. But it's just a really beautiful state of mind. It's what comes up in our mind naturally. For example, if you see a little child crying. I remember this one time I was in this big crowd of people, and there was this little boy, 2-3-year-old boy, who was standing there, and he was crying his eyes out. And it was obvious that he'd been separated from his parents. He didn't know where his parents were. Okay, so naturally in that kind of situation, we see that little kid, and we feel, I really want to help him. So that's actually both loving kindness and compassion. Loving kindness is we want him to be happy. Compassion is we want him to stop being unhappy. Okay, so they're kind of two sides of a coin. But that's a situation where that kind of feeling just comes up easily and naturally. It's caring, wanting to help, wanting to do what will bring happiness, what will relieve suffering. So it comes up easily with little kids or little puppies, little kittens, little animals, okay? But we probably also feel it with our friends and family members that we really care about. So it is a feeling that we have. And we can work on it, train ourselves to have it more and more and more and more for more and more and more and more people and beings and eventually everybody. It's so beautiful, such a beautiful state of mind. We benefit. We are, again, probably the first beneficiary of this state of mind. It's so beautiful. And physiologically as well. Yeah, it's good for our body, good for our health. And then, of course, it benefits others because it means we treat others with kindness. And that's what makes them happy, what benefits them. Also, I heard Ajahn Brahm mention this. He said, in his experience, because he leads lots of retreats, teaches meditation to lots of people, and he said he's noticed that people who have more loving kindness do better in meditation. And that makes sense, yeah. Because if you're short on this one, if you have more anger, irritation, then it's much harder to concentrate. You get irritated by all kinds of things: people, noise, yourself, your cushion, pain in your body. I mean, anything can be an object of irritation and anger. So the more anger you have, the more difficult it is to concentrate. The more you can subdue your anger and have more patience, kindness, love, compassion, more of that, it's easier to meditate, easier to keep your mind focused. That makes sense, yeah? So it's another reason for working on that. And then cultivating patience and forgiveness. So that's also, similar. There's a lot of material on this. We don't really have time to go into it. But again, Venerable Children's book on anger. Because when we're working on anger, at the same time we're increasing our patience. We're learning to be more patient with things that normally are irritating. Okay. Okay, just quickly, let's do number 3, because somebody was asking about that yesterday. Lethargy. This is actually 2 in 1. The first one is called lethargy or dullness. Those are different translations. And then sleepiness. So they're kind of similar. Sleepiness is more gross, the more coarse. That's when we're actually, you can be sitting there, but, you're nodding off. I remember once this monk was leading a meditation and he had a microphone in front of him, and he fell over on top of the microphone. Everybody knew, even though they had their eyes closed. So that one's easy to recognize. But lethargy or dullness is a little more subtle, but it's kind of going in that direction. It's just when your mind is dark, heavy. So, your mind isn't clear and bright and awake and alert. It's kind of dull and dark and heavy, as if you're sitting in a totally dark room with no lights on. It's a bit like that state of mind. Does that sound familiar? Have you ever been there? And it says it can also manifest physically as a lack of energy and stamina, or mentally as a dull, unclear state of mind, a sense of heaviness, or boredom, just no interest in I don't feel like doing anything. Okay, so we've talked about some of these before, so just some of the antidotes. So just to remind you, so it's helpful to open your eyes, make sure they're not closed, because closing the eyes can bring this on. So open your eyes. You can even have your eyes open quite wide. In some traditions, they do that. Like in the Dzogchen tradition, the Zen tradition, they meditate with their eyes quite wide open. Not like that, but more looking at kind of just staring in space in front. There's a picture of His Holiness the Dalai Lama meditating, and he's got his eyes open like that, just staring at space. So you just have to learn not to be distracted by things that you see. But that can help prevent sleepiness and dullness. Also check your posture, make sure you're sitting up straight. And then light. You can think of light. Imagine yourself full of light, your whole body full of light all around you. So that can help. And if the problem continues, there are certain contemplations you can bring in, such as the preciousness of your human life. How fortunate I am to have this life. And I don't want to waste it, sleeping, being dull. I mean, we do need to sleep sometimes, of course. So that's another remedy. Make sure you're getting enough sleep at night. If you're working too hard, you're stressed, you're not sleeping well at night, not sleeping enough at night, then that can be a cause for sleepiness in meditation. So take care of that. And then the qualities of the Buddha, for those who have a lot of enthusiasm and devotion to the Buddha, thinking about the Buddha, what he did with his life, that can also bring up inspiration. And then if the problem still doesn't go away, you can take a break, stand up, splash cold water on your face, go outside, get some fresh air. Because this is another thing, if we're trying to meditate in a place that's hot and stuffy, if we get too warm, then that can bring it on. So it's better to have some fresh air come in. And also, better not to meditate right after eating. Better to leave some time, because otherwise our energy is going into digesting the food, and that's, anyway. So leave some time, go for a walk, do some exercise before sitting down to meditate. Okay, so let's do some more meditation. And having looked at 3 of these hindrances and their antidotes, just see if during the meditation, if you notice any of these happening, and if you do, try to counteract it. I mean, sometimes you can just notice it and then let it go and come back to your meditation object. But if it doesn't go away, if it's really strong, then you can use one of these antidotes to counteract it.